Good morning and welcome to AM Prime on WESN, the content capital. My name is Keaton Shaw, filling in for Mr. Andy Johnson this morning as he is away at the moment. But nevertheless, the show must continue, and it is my pleasure and privilege to sit in this position this morning to share a conversation with you about what's taking place across Trinidad and Tobago. With so many things occurring, where do we get started? Well, most importantly is the upcoming budget statement to be presented by the Minister of Finance, Colm Imbud, for fiscal year 2022-2023. That is due on September the 26th, which is earlier than usual. Now, there's so many factors to consider in the upcoming budget, of which we've covered on this station over the last few weeks, most notably social expenditure as it relates to education and national security. Now, most importantly, out of that as well, what we missed out on, and which we will have this morning with our guest, is a conversation surrounding the agricultural sector. I'm sure you've heard of food security before, but have you heard of nutrition security, which ties into food security? Well, this morning we're speaking to the former head of the Farmers Union, Shiraz Khan, on that particular issue about what the agricultural sector would hope for in the upcoming budget. Is it the same old, same old? Have their voices fallen on deaf ears? Or has there been some progress over the last couple of years, not only as it relates to the financial allocation towards the agricultural sector, but towards generally the assistance given by the government and the willingness of the government to help push the sector forward? Well, Mr. Khan is with us via Zoom. Good morning, Mr. Khan. Welcome to AM Prime. Thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Good morning to you. Good morning to your studio and your viewers and your listeners. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to people in terms of what it is important for our country and for the our sector in terms of nutrition. And I'm happy that you said this morning not only food security but nutrition security, because what happens is that we can have an abundance of food which is not good for your health. And hopefully that we continue to think about nutrition security more important than just only food security. You know, and with the present situation in terms of COVID and all of that, I think it is critical for us to be thinking that way now, because what happens is that you might be eating a lot of junk rather than healthy food and continue to get sick. Because one of the things is that I want to share with you is that food, nutrition, nutritious intake into your body is one of the most critical things to keep you healthy. Yes, there's exercise, there's other things in terms of health to do, but if you put what you put into you is what you're going to get out. So this is one of the things that I want to share with you and Trinidad and Tobago, is that we all got to eat, but we got to eat healthy, we got to eat properly, we got to eat safe foods so that we could continue to stay healthy without having problems to deal with some of the challenges that are thrown to us by health. COVID is a very good example. In fact, we concentrate, the country, that is, the Ministry of Health, concentrated on telling people about vaccinated, but how much education has gone out in telling people how to eat properly, how to be able to stay away from some of those fast food that actually get you sick, and just don't eat some of the things out there and don't drink some of the things out there, so that your health could be more important to you.
Well, certainly, Mr. Khan, and I'm glad that we've started the conversation with that, because it ties in directly to when I mentioned as well whether or not there's been a serious push for the sector. Because yes, COVID-19 is the perfect example as to why nutrition security is important. A healthy lifestyle will include a healthy diet. That being said, we've seen the push from around the Caribbean, from various small island developing states. For example, St. Lucia most recently opened a cassava processing plant. I don't think people truly understand the amount of byproducts that you can get from cassava. That's what's taking place there. We've often heard the stories coming out of Guyana as well, and how they have enough food to supply themselves as well as parts of the Caribbean. With that being said, in Trinidad and Tobago, has there been a serious push to actually promote a more healthy lifestyle from the farming perspective? Because we have a great abundance of fresh produce, we have a great abundance of fresh meat, and it seems as though there's always that push towards the alternatives, the highly processed foods. In that instance, has there been enough education and enough of a push by the government, by the authorities, by the farmers' union to try and promote that message?
Well, we have continuously for a number of years been pushed towards asking the government to reduce the importation of those fancy foods, let me put it this way, right? Fancy foods. What is happening actually is a lot of people will go to the processed food because it's quick, it's fast. And that's one of the reasons why that type of food get the name fast food, because it's fast. Now, we have continuously asked, even I could go back up to 25 years ago, begging them to change the menu, the way that they feed the school children in the school feeding program. That has been one of the cries that I had for a number of years, right? About why it is that we have to be giving children, and some companies will vex with what I'm going to say, but say what? Why it is that a child has to get a soft drink in school for its breakfast? Why it is that we can't be giving them some milk? Why it is that we can't give them some other kind of fruit juice? Is it always about the dollars and cents, or is it about the health of our nation children? Why it is that in every box that they have to have at least 2 soft drinks a day? And we have challenged that. So we have always been challenging why it is that we continue to feed the nation like that. Because what happening is that if you start preparing the children from very small with the cultural change, and it has to come sooner or later, because we cannot be running down the fries and the fast food and so on, everything like that for children, because it is just not there, right? It's just not there. Take for instance, right? When we went to the school feeding program and we said, look, those imported meats that they are bringing and feeding children is all discarded meat. It's until in Parliament some people stood up and say yes, and then the Minister of Agriculture just confirmed that what we were saying is true. You are feeding children contaminated products. So if you put in that into the children, today you want to understand why it is that children are so violent and why they're getting so sick and all of that. It started from way back when by feeding the children properly, right? We have to understand that our nutrition security is critical for children in their growing up stages.
Well, Mr. Khan, on that note of nutrition security as well, in the upcoming budget statements, year after year, I'll be very honest with you, it seems as though it's the same old, same old. From my position where I sit, I often hear farmers asking more or less for the same thing. We've heard the plight of the farmers over the predial larceny unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. We've heard the plight of the farmers as it relates to infrastructure and infrastructural development. We've heard the plight of the farmers as it relates to incentives, because there's an understanding that global prices have gone up, prices which include the cost of fertilizers, though one could argue that should not necessarily be the case with Trinidad and Tobago given our petrochemical sector. So with all that in mind, is it that y'all are expecting or hoping for something different this year from the government, especially coming out of the Agri-Investment Expo and that push to reduce our imports by 50% by 2025?
Well, we have always argued for betterment, for improvement, for development, further development in the sector. We have always argued for that. In fact, coming out of the I am not expecting much out of that Agri-Expo, you know. That Agri-Expo was really something forced and run into, push into to go compete with other places of what they are doing. And I don't think that has done anything for the agriculture sector or for nutrition, food nutrition or security, nutrition security in Trinidad and Tobago. To tell you the truth, I think if you evaluate this a year from now and see what the benefit it brings for Trinidad and Tobago, we will hope fingers crossed, waiting to see what will happen. Now, let me tell you something. There's a number of issues that you spoke about just now in terms of the pre-larceny and other important aspects of development in agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago. We have a situation where, and not only in agriculture, but it always have been there, a lot of stealing taking place. We have a situation just last weekend, we got up Sunday morning, you never missing 2 big bulls in his pasture. We got up when the dogs was making noise and look and so on, because this bush, dark, everybody have large acreage of land, you can't see anything. Check in the morning, my neighbor 2 big bulls are missing. You go to the pre-larceny squad, because right now the pre-larceny squad is grounded. They have no pre-larceny unit. There are some people there, they're just in office because all the vehicles are packed up in Centennial. You go to the Freeport police station because they cannot do anything there. Freeport police station sending us to Shoguanas to take the report. You go to Shoguanas, they're sending it back to Freeport. This has been a problem for 25 years now and more now. Why it is that we cannot solve simple things like that? Now, if it is that you have a problem with the vehicles that they are over 15 years old and dilapidated and can't get nothing, they will say first they didn't have no money. I asked you a question and I'm asking you the question today. In 2021 to 2022, there was 500 million put aside for stimulus and development in the agriculture sector. Where and how that $500 million was spent from 2020 to 2021. And then, from 2021 to 2022. And then from 2021 to 2022, this last fiscal year gone there, we got $300 million. How much of that was used to develop agriculture? How much money was used to deal with in terms of giving the resources to the pre-larceny squad, giving the resources to the different regional corporation in terms of fixing roads for the agriculture sector? How much money was spent? What happened with that 300? So within 2 years, $800 million was allocated apart from the budget. Where have that money been spent? And we keep asking those questions, but we're not getting answers to it. So we jump into another budget, not talking about where that money went and what it has done for us. We're going to ask, we want to be more serious about agriculture. We look with bated breath what's going to be improved in terms of the fiscal allocations and development in this sector. We make recommendations, but we're not hearing any discussion further on that.
Well, Mr. Khan, on that particular point, is it that now the farmers, again, what I'm hearing from you is nothing new to my ears. I'm not saying it's your fault at all. I'm saying the fact is that what you've just mentioned, I clearly remember that $500 million stimulus package, which was read 2 years ago in the financial statement delivered by Minister of Finance Colm Imbers. So is it that with budgets passed, that the farmers themselves, whom are supposed to be benefiting from such stimulus packages and such allocations, cannot actually themselves point out to where that money has gone? They themselves don't know, and they have not seen development at all. It's just a lovely figure that is often touted and called by the Minister of Finance, and yet the funds never seem to flow into the sector.
Well, that is exactly what we are saying, because what happening is that if we don't, people say, all right, we keep hearing you talk, repeating yourself, saying the same thing over and over. My friend, what do? Do we sit down and allow them to continue to do the same thing all the time and not complain about it? How do we know, or where do we know? And I'm saying this morning, there's an independent senator, opposition senator, let us find out what happened to that $800 million in the last 2 years, where it was, why it wasn't used in agriculture, in the Ministry of Agriculture, why it have not done anything to benefit us. Because at this point in time, we have the 3 major issues facing the world, and we are facing it too. Thank God the global warming is not affecting us so much as in some other countries, because we're small and then kind of thing, but it is affecting us in many ways than the other. The global pandemic, and then the Ukraine-Russia conflict, right? Now, if it is that we have a problem with the constant increase of grains, we have a proposal before the government more than, 13 years now, 14 years, of using some of those abandoned carrying lands to produce large amount of root crops to mitigate the use of wheat middling into animal feed, and thereby reducing the importation of middling, and thereby reducing our food import bill in a number of ways than the other. And that has not happened, and you have the money there, and I don't know how or what going on with the money. The additional thing, you mentioned earlier on about St. Lucia setting up a cassava factory. I don't know if you could recall, in 2007, 2008, there was a company, a state company set up that named Taba. Do you remember that company?
I can't say at the top of my head, sir, no.
Okay, so the Taba means Trinidad and Tobago Agribusiness Association. Millions of dollars, tens of millions, probably 100 million plus, was invested into that company to make cassava flour and potatoes, chips, and when I say potato, I'm talking about sweet potato, cassavas, chips, all of that. All of that. It had a big company in Caroni, and then they went to Freeport. All that equipment. But come 2010, they didn't support that Taba. And come 2015, it wasn't supported. And we were producing a lot of things out of Taba. Taba was an organization. Yes, it probably had problems of management or operations. But why not look at how we could benefit it and make changes? But Taba were making flour and having flour on the shelf. That is cassava flour, sweet potato flour, and them kind of thing.
Well, Mr. Khan, you know, with the time that we have left, and I'm greatly appreciative that we've been able to have this conversation, because quite often, as I said, I find that the conversation always flows around infrastructure and the cost of petrochemicals and pesticides and fertilizers, the cost of floods and whatnot. So I'm glad that we've actually been able to expand in terms of nutrition security, and you just even mentioning Taba. But in your opinion, because you've been in the position, and you've been in the position for at least 25 years, as you've mentioned, do you see that farmers and the agricultural sector is only raised in times when the government sees it fit to use it as political scapegoats? For example, we're going to speak heavily about agriculture because it's going to help us in an upcoming election. We're going to speak heavily about agriculture because it's going to help us get votes. Like you just mentioned, you don't think anything will come out of the Agri-Investment Expo. Is it now that maybe that expo was seen as a way to try and further diplomatic relations and maybe financial relations with the likes of Guyana and Barbados, and that the agricultural sector was used as a guise? Is that how farmers feel?
That is how I feel personally. That is how I feel, because what happening is that okay, before I go back into there, let me give you a good example of how things have been happening, right? You have a situation where the farmers of this country have been waiting for more than 30 years. Some of them, their lease has been expired, and land tenure remain one of the critical issues for our farmers in this country. If any government, I'm talking for the past 30 years, any government with an ounce of the salt of their in office, is that issue of land tenure. You see, that issue of land tenure and respect for the farmers is critical for our country. Not the farmer, not Shiraz Khan and the other farmers who are producing, because we equal living. No problem with that, fine. But when the pandemic broke out and the first shutdown that took place, if you could recall, the Prime Minister said that all the police and so on, all of those will continue to operate like normal. And soon as he finished with the protective service, he said, and farmers will be allowed to operate. Make sure you get your pass. So he put farmers as an essential service. The Prime Minister of this country, when he shut down the country, the first time when we had to have the first state of emergency, farmers after protective services came up after. Have they given the respect, like what they have done for the pandemic, to the farmers and the farmers of this country and the organizations that led into farming? No, have nothing. So we're still fighting, we're still arguing. Because if during the pandemic, we didn't put emphasis on agriculture. And Ukraine is now showing us how it is that we're going to suffer for more food and all of that. You hear in the United Nations and everybody else saying that how we're going to have a serious food shortage. And what have we done in Trinidad and Tobago? What have we launched? What has we put in place to mitigate that on behalf of the citizens?
Mm-hmm.
Farmers have land, farmers always looking at what in all the pandemic that went on, excuse me, what has the farmers benefited from the pandemic? You see people get stimulus packages, the people got additional money, people got a lot of things. What has the agriculture sector gotten, right? In fact, our feed bill has gone up by almost 40% in less than a year, right? Our chemicals has gone up. And you mentioned earlier on about the fertilizer. We in Trinidad and Tobago produce urea. Urea is a regular fertilizer used in crops and so on. And you would know that the urea price that we are paying is the international price. These companies that come into the country and get all the tax holidays and tax benefits of producing the fertilizer, but yet our citizens cannot benefit from a price because it is produced locally. We are paying that. And we have gone to the Ministry of Agriculture and we have spoken to them, right? Let us get a little subsistence on the feed price and the fertilizer. We asked for $30 rebate or 30% rebate on the feed and the fertilizer. And we did that way back in March month. And we're still waiting for answers. So it's home, and this was done with the Minister of Agriculture, his people from the ministry, the Junior Minister of Agriculture, all the other heads of the Agriculture Department in the Ministry of Agriculture. And up to today, Wallahi, I swear by Almighty Allah, up to today, we have not gotten a word from them. We have not gotten a word of what they can do to benefit us in terms of increasing our production. So what happened is that you have farmers cannot produce because of pre-elastic. You have farmers producing because it is so expensive for them to continue to produce. And then what happening is that the most important thing that I want to share with you this morning before I go is that the protectionism for our farmers is not there in this country because we continue to allow importation of foods that we produce in this country.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Khan,
you understand?
I do understand, and I'm
producing.
Yes, Mr. Khan. Well, I apologize to you. I'm so sorry that I wish we could expand a bit further on that, but due to time being a factor, this is where we'll have to conclude this morning's discussion. But as you concluded with that, I think that will lead us into our next discussion when we welcome you back to WESN. Thank you very much, sir.
Welcome. Take care. Have a good day.
All the best, sir. Well, that was the former president of the Farmers Union, Shiraz Khan. Very important points, actually, that he made with his last statements, and something that we will hope to expand on when we're welcoming again. The protectionism for farmers in Trinidad and Tobago is simply not there. So then, is the respect for farmers of Trinidad and Tobago there? Well, certainly a very, very valuable point. Hopefully we can expand on that later on. But ladies and gentlemen, we take a quick break here on AM Prime, my apologies. And when we return, well, the conversation continues.
The Guide family has been serving TNT for over 80 years. JE Guide Funeral Home and Crematorium, 2 locations, San Fernando and Princestown.
Chantwell Vibes, a musical tribute to Andre Tanker, Saturday, September 24th, 2022, Central Bank Auditorium. Showtime, 7:30 p.m. Featuring 3 Canal, Mavis John, Ataclan, Empress Ajay, Stacy Sobers, and panist Natasha Joseph. Tickets $300. Available at Crosby's Music Center, St. James. Extra Foods, Arima, Grand Bazaar, and Endeavor. Online at Island E-Tickets. committee members at 678-2843 or 482-3111. Central Bank box office on the day of the event. Mart's Liquor Palace, Diego Martin Main Road, La Puerta. A musical tribute to Andre Tanker. Saturday, September 24th, 2022. Central Bank Auditorium. Showtime, 7:30 p.m.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Well, welcome back to AM Prime here on WESN. Now let's look at today's Newsday poll with a question. And I must say that this question is extremely pertinent, not only to recent events that came to light, but generally across Trinidad and Tobago with what's taken place over the last 2 to 3 years, and certainly as we celebrated our 60th independence anniversary. So the question is, do you believe that here every creed and race find an equal place still holds true in Trinidad and Tobago today? Well, the first response to this question was yes. I think that is basically still quite true. There is a fringe element that tries to hijack it, but it's not working for them. Now, that last word, not working for them, it would have been interesting if the individual expanded a bit more on what they meant by them, but your response generally, there is a fringe element that tries to hijack it when it's basically still quite true. There may be some truth to that, because the strength of here every creed and race finds an equal place is really with the cards that we hold as citizens. The second answer, no. The reasoning lies in the news being reported every day. Hence, my first statements as to what we've seen over the last 3 years, and certainly as we've celebrated our 60th independence anniversary. Let's look at the third response. They would find a place, no doubt, but it doesn't mean it would be equal. Now, that is a debate to have, ladies and gentlemen. That's quite a deep point there. And certainly we'd hope to debate that, maybe if not on AM Prime, certainly on another platform. And the last response, we go by who feel their race more superior and feel they are entitled. Not every race should have an equal place. Well, not every race should have an equal place. Sentiments being expressed by one of the respondents there. Can't say that I agree with that, but nevertheless, everybody is entitled to their opinion. That's the Newsday poll. A very interesting question, and we thank you very much to the folks at Newsday. Well, as the discussions continue this morning, it is my pleasure to introduce Industrial Relations Consultant at SIR, Mr. Stephen Thomas, to talk to me this morning about the repercussions of industrial action. Now, we've seen protests taking place across Trinidad and Tobago from various sectors, but in some instances, we wonder whether or not there are actually repercussions to it. Most notably, the events that took place on Monday, in which teachers sought to stay home on the first day of the new academic year and the full reopening of schools following the COVID-19 pandemic to rest and reflect over ongoing wage negotiations. Well, Mr. Thomas is with us via Zoom this morning. Good morning, sir. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, sir, it's certainly a pleasure to have this discussion with you. In your capacity, Industrial Relations Consultant, there are those who are questioning, inclusive of myself, as to whether or not there could be repercussions for teachers for staying home, because though there is a right to protest, every citizen has a right to protest, and we understand that, is there a neglect of duty and responsibility? Could we argue that it goes against the terms and conditions of their work by staying home when they see it fit? And if such action continues, could the government then take action against teachers?
Well, thank you for asking the question. I think it's a question that is much broader than the way that you have contextualized it. It speaks to a level of unrest that is persistent in Trinidad and Tobago and has been so for a number of years. And we keep speaking about the country moving forward, not understanding that what you get out is principally a consequence of what we put in. I am often inclined to look at another country, an East Asian country, that became independent about the same time as Trinidad and Tobago. It has about 2/3 of our land mass. It has about 4 times our population. And it has moved in that same period from where we are to being a first world country. The quality of life and standard of living is about the top 10 in the world. How did they get there? They got there, first of all, by the society being a lot more disciplined than we are. Because it is not that I take any pleasure in criticizing Trinidad and Tobago, but at the same time, the truth is, we have to admit, because we talk about runaway crime rate and all of that, the truth is we have to admit the society lacks in significant ways a level of discipline that is indispensable to us organizing ourselves to move forward. So that what happened on Monday is not to be looked at as an isolated incident. But what is significant about it, from my perspective, is the fact that we have just looked at children being deprived for the past 2 years from face-to-face schooling. We understand the social benefits of having children create friendships, learn to work together, learn to play together, learn to study together. Because if we are to build a more harmonized society, people have to learn how to meet and treat, how to engage one another, how to resolve differences. And the school is the nursery bed for cultivating that. So when we have a society where we talked about children has been underperforming for the past 2 years, principally because of the impact of the pandemic, because what the pandemic did is exacerbate the inequalities in the society. Persons who had access to technology, who had access to support facilities for homeschooling, their kids in all probability would have maintained certain standards, as opposed to the children who came from underprivileged homes. And we must admit that the inequality manifests itself in terms of when you look at the statistics about the number of children who come from underprivileged homes in Trinidad and Tobago. So Monday's incident, I think, was unfortunate. Not that there's not a right and a need to advocate for what a trade union or the trade union membership wants, but sometimes we have to sacrifice our immediate concerns in the interests of the general welfare of the future of the country.
Mr. Thomas, I'm actually very glad that you expanded it from the question that I put forward. You expanded it to that broader dimension that you would have responded with, and I'm glad for that. Now, with that being said, you use that term. There's no problem in advocating for what the union wants, and you see that term wants. In your opinion, because I'm also tying that back into a previous statement that you made with regards to what you put in is what you get out. And exactly. Adding both of those statements together, generally from your viewpoint with this level of unrest, Have we forgotten the true spirit of negotiations? In fact, I would even go as far as to ask, do we even know how to negotiate in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, there are several modes that you could employ in negotiations. It appears that we have a distinct preference for the combative mode. That, at the end of the day, does not achieve very much, except if you employ it for just a short while to probably signal to the other side that you are prepared to take certain measures that would make them uncomfortable. But beyond taking those measures for any short period of time, it is time that as a society we recognize that if we really talk about every creed and race having an equal place, the only way we can manifest that is if we are prepared to sit down and engage in intelligent dialogue with one another, with each other, and to understand the positions of each other, because we see it in the news every day. Mm-hmm. Just yesterday evening, for instance, I was hearing on the news a particular community where a road was destroyed because of a landslide, not being considerate of the fact that, yes, the road was destroyed, but they have alternative routes to enter and exit that particular community. Not saying that their concern is not legitimate, but what I think was unfortunate, they compared it to another part of the country where the people who reside in that part of the country are people in the lower strata of the society. And you know what the comparison was? If it was in that community, the government would have responded immediately and executed the road repair works, not recognizing that that community had one entrance and exit to connect with the rest of Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore it was something that is of greater urgency to attend to the destruction of their roadway, as opposed to another community who have equal entitlement, but who have other options in terms of entry points and exit into and from that particular community. So that people have rights. We live in a society, we are all citizens, we, I suppose, pay taxes, we are entitled to a share in the natural patrimony, and therefore we have legitimate expectations. But to suggest that one other community should not have been assisted or would have been assisted more expeditiously than the particular community whose problem arose one day earlier is a disconnect with reality.
Okay, well, I hear your example, Mr. Thomas, and it's a good example because it goes back into what you mentioned about this combative approach when we mention negotiations. You made another statement there which spoke to me, and that is, you know, we as a nation must recognize and realize that we need to have intelligent discussions and conversations and move away from this combative approach. Now, one might argue, how could you say that when simply we see that combative approach taking place within the walls of Parliament and where our leaders sit? So why would you expect any different from us if that is what they're giving to us? On the other hand, one might argue that Trinidad and Tobago is simply incapable of having intelligent discussions. I mean, Mr. Thomas, not that I'm trying to be insultive to anyone, but reality will state, from what I've witnessed, that we as a society are simply incapable of having that level of intelligent discussions and conversations, and therefore the combative approach is the only thing we know.
And I would have to agree with you to the extent that if that is what the young population witness every day, we could shout from the mountaintop to the young people in the country that you must be disciplined, you must respect other people's rights, you must not infringe upon other persons. We could shout that from the mountaintop every day. But what do we exhibit? What do we demonstrate by our conduct? Like you quite rightly said, from the highest level in the land, you may not be aware, but in preparing for this interview, I went back and listened to some recordings of some debates in the House during the period of Eric Williams and Sinanan and those guys. And you would be amazed at the quality of the contributions compared to what we hear today. And therefore, how do we expect the young people who are supposed to pattern themselves after what they learn by our conduct, how do we expect them to be any different? Up till last night, I was looking at the police is looking at a program called GRACE. Mm-hmm. It is the reduction, the gradual reduction of the gang reduction and community empowerment programs. But if you are to empower communities, people learn more by what they live than what you say to them. So I agree with you totally. It appears by our conduct that we are exhibited that we are incapable of intelligent discourse. And I don't think that's a good place for us as a society to be.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Thomas, thank you very much for joining me. I mean, this is where we'll have to conclude this morning's discussion with you, but I certainly enjoyed how you were able to expand beyond just what transpired on Monday and the capability, not only of the unions, but from both sides, because it's an all-encompassing discussion that this combative approach is not what we need, but we need to have more intelligent discussions. And quite frankly, I'm glad that we see eye to eye when we say that it seems as though there is that incapability of having that level of intelligence discussions. Sir, thank you very much and have a great day. All the best to you.
You're most welcome and thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, certainly it's very interesting to hear it from the perspective of an industrial relations consultant as to what is taking place here in Trinidad and Tobago. And you may disagree with me, and you may disagree with what Mr. Thomas said, but certainly ask yourself that question this morning. Is Trinidad and Tobago, are the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, do they want to have that level of intelligence discussion? Because we could talk about the government, don't get me wrong, but are we capable? Because education does not equal intelligence. Bear that in mind and understand very clearly what the statement I just made there. We take a break on this program, ladies and gentlemen, and when we return to AM Prime, well, we take a look at what's taking place across the region.
COVID times, things are a little different. You may have some skepticism when it comes to going to the hospital or going into the doctor because of crowds or because of so many people being present. We are now in the world of telemedicine.
Telemedicine is the innovation of using technology to treat patients at a distance.
Zakia is here today. She's going to show us a little bit of what she does as part of her at-home exercise routine. What's up, Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in-store at Forces Flagship McLean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Welcome back to AM Prime here on WESN. Now let's take a look at what's happening across the region. We start with Guyana, where the Guyana opposition is hammering the government on the cost of living. Here's more from Guyana's news source.
The opposition APNU-AFC today said the release of the mid-year report by the Ministry of Finance proves that the country is indeed facing a cost of living crisis and there needs to be more assistance from the government. The opposition has repeatedly called on the government to introduce a comprehensive plan that could benefit all citizens as against cash handouts to selected groups. APNU-AFC member Elson Lowe said the situation should not be taken for granted.
We reiterate our call for an increase in the salaries of public servants well above the inflation rate, grants for farmers to help boost production, fuel vouchers for canter and bus drivers to bring transportation costs down, and an expanded school feeding program, among other short to long-term measures.
He also said the worry is that the situation could become worse in the coming months, leading into the Christmas season.
Guyanese should note that with the price of crude oil remaining at the high water mark, the government projects that the NRF deposits will increase by 32.5% more than expected to US $1.1 billion in 2022. This is already on top of the money that is in the fund prior to 2022. Yet the government can only commit to the continued monitoring of cost of living throughout the rest of this year. This is unacceptable and a clear indication that the PPPC does not care for Guyana's poor.
The opposition also chided the government for what it called its sluggish spending on projects that have been funded by the 2022 budget.
Up to June, disbursements are well below 50% in many regards. For example, on health, the government has expended only 36% so far of the $73.2 billion budgeted for the year. On the National School Feeding Program, only 35% of the budgeted $2 billion has so far been spent. Clearly, the government delivers a big budget speech, knowing full well it lacks the ability to successfully undertake the projects listed in that very budget.
The government, while acknowledging the rise in the cost of living in the mid-year report, has been pushing the growth in the economy, which has been fueled by the oil sector. There have been numerous calls from political parties and other groups for a long-term plan to alleviate the impact of the rise in food and other prices to be addressed.
Well, sticking with the topic of finance and what's happening across the Caribbean, we shift across now to Grenada, where Phase 3 of the COVID stimulus economic package has begun. Let's take a look at this report from GIS.
More Grenadians who were affected by the COVID-19 pandemic will benefit from assistance from the government of Grenada. This comes with the launch of Phase 3 of the COVID-19 Economic Support Stimulus Package, which will run from September 1st to December 31st. This phase will take a different format by targeting new and existing small businesses in the informal and formal sectors through the provision of financial support in the form of capital incentives and concessions. The goal is to encourage business growth and expansion for persons who are interested in beginning a new business or expanding an existing one. The government believes that investing in our homegrown businesses can boost the local economy and the morale of our people by empowering them to support their families, employ persons, and contribute to community building in a significant way. In addition, the Unemployment Benefit Assistance and Seed Program will be extended for the period September to December 2022, with the inclusion of beneficiaries from the island of Carriacou and Petite Martinique.
Well, thank you very much to GSI Grenada for that report, folks. AM Prime now breaks for WESN's News on the Hour. Well, when we return, we take a look once more at what's happening across the region, and then we welcome our final guest for this morning's edition of the program. Stay tuned to AM Prime.
Here's your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise St. Clair. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Commission of Inquiry into Paria cannot provide legal assistance to families. Farmers call for predial larceny unit to be fully staffed. And Pantrimbago election woes continue. Now for the details. Chairman of the Commission of Inquiry into Paria Trading, Queen's Counsel Jerome Lynch, says the Commission cannot provide legal assistance to families of the Paria divers tragedy based on the Commission of Inquiry Act. He was speaking at the opening of the start of the process on Wednesday.
I have made it clear that I support Council being instructed on their behalf, and this Commission of Inquiry has conveyed that much to them, and the Attorney General, and the Minister, the Honourable Stuart Young, and just about anybody else who will listen. We are governed by the Commission of Inquiry Act. It does not empower us to grant any kind of legal aid or legal assistance, or to quantify any legal aid or assistance that may be given. That is the responsibility of others.
He said that as far as he is concerned, those who are representing the families affected could and should be represented, but is beyond his purview to provide such services.
Seek it elsewhere, please. But I want to be quite clear. Those who are directly involved with the issues that concern this inquiry cannot and will not be permitted to thwart the inquiry by making their cooperation with it contingent upon receiving legal assistance.
The former president of the Farmers Union, Shiraz Khan, is pleading for the predial larceny unit to be fully staffed and equipped with the necessary resources as farmers continue to be mistreated. He expressed his hope that such would be addressed in the upcoming budget statement for fiscal year 2022-2023.
When they went to the predial larceny squad, because they shut down, they just only have officers there, they're not taking anything. You go to the Freeport police station to report it. Freeport police station send you to Shugwana. Shugwana send you back to Freeport, which eventually took the report. But that is how they treat the people.
The controversy surrounding Pantrimbago's president, Beverly Ramsey Moore, saw further escalation as members of the organization spoke on what they claim are her blatant disregard for its consultation. Captain of the Sand Steel Symphony and a member of Pantrimbago, Akil Arendel, claims that members are wanting to execute their democratic responsibility by voting, but wish to do so by a secret ballot, as is their right, as there is a sense of fear that if votes are cast through open ballots, members will be discriminated against and even face disbarment from the organization.
There are a lot of persons waiting for the opportunity to exercise the constitutional right by secret ballot, because right now by ban are being victimized and other bans are being victimized because we are speaking against the wrongdoing in Pantrimbago. Very soon, I think that Robert Hernandez, myself, and other members would be banned from Pantrimbago because we are speaking the truth. We are speaking about the wrongs of Pantrimbago.
Well, that was News to the Hour on WESN. I am Denise St. Clair. Thanks for watching.
Chantwell Vibes, a musical tribute to Andre Tanker, Saturday, September 24th, 2022, Central Bank Auditorium. Showtime, 7:30 p.m. Featuring Three Canal, Mavis John, Ataclan, Empress Ajay, Stacy Sobers, and panist Natasha Joseph. Tickets, $300. Available at Crosby's Music Center, St. James. Extra Foods, Rima, Grand Bazaar, and Endeavour. Online at Island E-Tickets. Committee members at 678-2843 or 482-3111. Central Bank box office on the day of the event. Mart's Liquor Palace, Diego Marte Main Road, La Puerta. a musical tribute to Andre Tanker. Saturday, September 24th, 2022. Central Bank Auditorium. Showtime, 7:30 p.m.
The community of Springfield, Westmoreland is
on
still...
WESN. Thank you very much to our head of news, Denise Sinclair, for news on the hours. Now, as we continue with the program this morning, let's continue with a look at what is taking place across the region. We shift across to Jamaica, where residents of Springfield, Jamaica, are not coping well with the deaths of 3 children following a house fire. Here is more from TVJ News.
The community of Springfield, Westmoreland is still trying to come to terms with the tragic death of 3 brothers and the injuring of their sister from a house fire on Sunday night. But as we hear in this report from Herman Green, some governmental assistance will be provided to the family.
The 14-year-old girl who was severely burnt in the house fire in Springfield, Westmoreland, which claimed the lives of her 3 brothers, will have to seek treatment overseas. According to her father, who was speaking with the Education Minister, Favour Williams, and MP for Western Westmoreland, Moreland Wilson, on Monday, this is because of the severity of the burns. It's understood that she was transferred to a hospital in the corporate area on Monday and is to be flown overseas for treatment. The single father, who has been hailed by the community for his outstanding work in raising the children, is now clinging on to hope that his daughter will survive the ordeal. In the meantime, he has found a way to deal with the traumatic experience.
We do everything. Most time I remember, the two women come look for them, which I don't see them. Nobody show me no picture of their death.
Education Minister Favour Williams says help will be provided to the family through the Child Protection and Family Services Agency, CPFSA.
As you know, they are our agency at the ministry. When disasters like this happen, they're there. They were here this morning to take information, to provide psychosocial support for the family, and even beyond that, financial support, in whatever way we can.
According to the Jamaica Fire Brigade, the official cause of the fire is still not known. However, the police believe that the fire may have been started by a candle which was lit due to a power outage in the community Sunday night.
Certainly a sad story indeed. It takes me back to that story from last year with the fire at Rookery Nook here in Port of Spain. Truly a sad story indeed. Well, we take a look at what's taking place in Barbados, where the Minister in the Prime Minister's office with responsibility for culture, Senator Dr. Chantal Monroe-Knight, says many lessons were learned following crop over 2022. Let's take a look at this report.
The big question is, where do we go from here? How do we ensure that crop over 2023 again is successful and again provides the platform for us to showcase the best of what Barbados has to offer? I want to indicate that, and I hope that we will remember, that this is the National Cultural Foundation. It's the National Cultural Foundation. The Crop Over Festival is a myriad of different events.
Excuse me, Miss Williams, could you center yourself a little bit?
The big events where multiple and thousands of people converge. But it's the National Cultural Foundation. It's not the National Carnival Foundation. It's not the National Entertainment Foundation. And so that the plethora of events and stakeholders that are involved in
you might be muted.
National festival.
Oh, you're not muted? Okay, no, I'm not
turning up. We want to be sure that for 2023 we have a festival that is again.
Mr. Williams, very quickly, we need to do a sound test. Very, very quickly. Could you just say something very quickly?
We are cognizant.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Continue to work with all of the stakeholders, like I said, the ground leaders, etc., that we've walked with through 2022. We'll continue to talk to them to 2023. But at the same time, we are cognizant that we have, as I said before, a multiplicity of stakeholders in the context of this, the entirety of the Crop Over Festival.
Welcome back to AM Prime, and thank you very much for the regional feature, courtesy our producer here. But as we continue with this morning's program, I want to welcome our third and final guest, Strategic Operations Consultant at Gavi's Sanitation Company Limited. This is Miss Dominique Williams. She's with us via Zoom. Good morning, Miss Williams.
Good morning.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Miss Williams. And well, welcome to AM Prime. And a pleasure to have you here, especially since we're speaking about the importance of sanitization now that schools have reopened. And a new academic year following the COVID-19 pandemic. Students are interacting full-time with one another as all classes are now in full gear, at least across most schools here in Trinidad and Tobago. But COVID-19 is still a part of everyday living. In terms of sanitization, be it on an individual level for personal care or in the school environment, what would you deem as best practice for ensuring the safety of all?
Well, best practice would be basically what our Ministry of Education has been telling us all this time, which is to sanitize, to wash your hands, to maintain a distance. However, on the level of schools, where you would have the population being hundreds of students and then mix that with teachers, it is really best practice that they do an industrial sanitize at least twice a month. Every 2 weeks would be a best practice, I would say.
Well, is there a substantial difference between this industrial sanitizer that you would have just mentioned and ordinary sanitizers or chemicals that one may acquire in any general store?
Yes, there is. Because ordinary sanitizers tend to be less, even though our products are non-toxic and environmentally friendly, they kill on contact with surfaces and with upholstery, whereas everyday sanitizers are more medically friendly for your skin, for contact of the skin, to try to not make it toxic for consumers to use it on a regular basis. So you will realize that you would use a regular sanitizer probably 20 times a day, depending on where you are. You would realize if you're going to the malls and to the schools now, you have to sanitize as you enter, you have to sanitize as you enter each classroom, you have to sanitize as you enter the washroom, sanitize as you exit the washroom. So these sanitizers will tend to be a grade that is safe medically. Sanitizers for industrial use tend to be a little bit stronger, but environmentally safe, that can be used around kids, around food, and that it's not toxic.
Well, as you mentioned that, you know, many times if you go to purchase sprays, let's just, you know, chemicals to spray around your yard, your household, you know, as you would have just mentioned, they often say you need to stay away for 3 hours. Or don't have any pets or anybody in contact with the area for about 3 hours. Is that the case?
No, not with the products that Gavi's use. So Gavi's use HOCI products, which is non-toxic and safe to use around kids, around pets, around food. So it's safe to you can actually go back into the environment right after we have sanitized with our products.
Okay, that's actually pretty good to know. Do you have any tips for schools to maintain safety between sprayings? And is there like a recommended time frame between sprayings that schools should use as best practice?
Well, as I said before, yes, every 2 weeks would be best practice. However, because of course, I know a lot of people try to stay away from that. So at least once a month. And in between sprays, you do what is recommended by WHO and by our Ministry of Health, which would be to try to social distance as much as possible, sanitize your hands, wash your hands, try to make sure that there are soaps in your washroom, that there are paper towels to be used. The lack of paper towels tend to create a damp environment, which makes it even easier for viruses to spread.
Well,
that is something that people don't pay attention to.
Well, certainly, And we'll get into that in a moment, but I heard you mention 2 weeks is a recommended time frame, and then you said people,
2 weeks is a recommended
because of the cost, people might say, okay, you know what, we could do it once a month. The industrial strength sanitizers that Gavi's use, this is going to last for 2 weeks? This is what you're saying? 2 weeks to a month?
No, what I'm saying is that because of the rotation of the population, of the environment, it is easy for viruses to reoccur. Because you have students and teachers using the classrooms often on a daily basis. You might have sneezing occurring, coughing occurring, and then you're dealing with kids. So they may not be as vigilant when it comes to washing their hands, wiping down their surfaces. So in a school environment, it's recommended that every 2 weeks or once a month that you have the environment fully sanitized. Fully sprayed industrially.
Well, I understand that.
It's just because of the nature of the environment.
Well, certainly, I'm glad you expanded on that. But, you know, you mentioned something here in which people may not be entirely mindful of that now, because we've all gone back out to work. We've all had schools reopen. Everybody's now in full gear, it would seem. We're no longer wearing masks. In your opinion, do you think that we've forgotten, or because you said we're not mindful, but completely forgotten that there are still things that we need to do to maintain that level of safety, to protect ourselves and others, because we're still living with COVID-19?
We are very much still living with COVID-19. I think that we have become very much desensitized to the fact that this is still a life-threatening virus. And it's because just yesterday I went to the pharmacy and there was no hand sanitizer to sanitize before I entered the building, and I was in shock. But I do think that we've become a little desensitized to the topic. But it is still very much important, especially where our kids are concerned, because they may not understand the severity of the situation. I know, for example, my son's school, they're preschoolers, and there are no shoes allowed on the compound.
Okay.
Which I think is an excellent practice.
Yeah. No, certainly. I know that some schools, especially preschools, are taking some very, very serious precautions, especially when it comes to protecting the kids.
Yes. So,
sure, go ahead.
When it comes to sanitizing, it's not only about spraying. It's also about your garbage disposals. It's also about, in our female schools, it's about educating our young people about how they properly dispose of their hygienic items, because all of these things contribute to the spread of these viruses.
Well, Ms. Williams, I'm so pleased that you just mentioned educating your children on properly disposing of items, of garbage, personal care.
Which is a big drive for Gavi's.
Certainly.
We really intend on doing a lot of educational programs from the primary school level all the way up to help students to learn about proper sanitation, proper hygiene.
Well, we're all supportive of that, and we're grateful that Gavi's is giving back in terms of education, in terms of an education drive. But very finally, and I want to thank you for taking the time to join us on AM Prime this morning, because I certainly believe, I share that opinion with you, that we certainly are no longer mindful. We've become desensitized to the situation, not knowing that we are still in a pandemic, and COVID-19 is still real. I mean, I think for the month of September, we've, today's September the 8th, we've had over 1,000 cases, over 40 deaths already for the month. So bear that in mind. But people may have this perception that sanitization is costly. And with the current cost of living and the state of our affairs, people might say, this is not important. We're not putting money there. Would you argue otherwise?
I would, because the reality is sanitation is a matter of life or death. And with Gavi's, it's actually affordable. We charge $6 per square feet, which is well below market market value. We are a lot cheaper than a lot of our competitors. But the product itself is a necessity. It's no longer, we are no longer operating in an arena where industrial sanitizing is a luxury service. It is now a necessity, and all organizations and schools and offices should be something that's at the top of their budget.
Certainly. Well, Ms. Dominique Williams, Strategic Operations Consultant at Gavi Sanitization Company, thank you very much for being here on the program and for all that you would have stated, because I agree with everything that you've said. And I must say that we support any form of education or education drive. So not only for what you've done here on AM Prime this morning, but for what you intend to do within the school environment and the school setting. Well, congratulations on that, and thank you very much. Well done to Gavi's.
Thank you for having us.
No problem at all, my pleasure. Well, folks, you heard it. We have become desensitized. We can't argue against that. I mean, yes, we have seen some people still wearing their mask, still walking with their sanitizer, but for the majority of the population, it seems as though COVID-19 is something of the past. We're still living with it. It's still part of everyday life. Let us remember that and take that in mind as we go forward. Well, folks, we take a quick break here on AM Prime. When we return, we'll have our Watch This segment, and then we'll conclude proceedings for today's edition of the program.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch Ultra Slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order, or visit us in-store at Forces flagship MacBean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
Chantwell Vibes, a musical tribute to Andre Tanker. Saturday, September 24th, 2022. Central Bank Auditorium. Showtime, 7:30 p.m. Featuring Three Canal, Mavis John, Ataclan, Empress Ajay, Stacy Sobers, and panist Natasha Joseph. Tickets $300. Available at Crosby's Music Center, St. James. Extra Foods, Rima, Grand Bazaar, and Endeavour. Online at Island E-Tickets. Committee members at 678-2843 or 482-3111. Central Bank box office on the day of the event. Mart's Liquor Palace, Digomarte Main Road, La Puerta. A musical tribute to Andre Tanker. Saturday, September 24th, 2022. Central Bank Auditorium. Showtime, 7:30 p.m.
Welcome back to AM Prime. Now, China holds annually police fitness tests, which includes some really strenuous tasks. Now, let's take a look at this clip, and boy oh boy, is this quite amazing.
Singapur bis Berlin. Wenn du mich fragst, wo es am schönsten war, sag ich Sansibar. Es war eine harte Überfahrt, 10 Wochen nur das Deck geschrubbt, hab die Welt verflucht, in den Wind gespuckt und salziges Wasser geschluckt. Als wir den Anker warfen, war es himmlische Ruhe und die Sonne stand senkrecht am Himmel. Als ich über die Reling sah, da glaubte ich zu träumen. Da waren 1000 Boote und sie hielten auf uns zu. In den Booten waren Männer und Frauen, ihre Leiber glänzten in der Sonne und sie sangen ein Lied, das kam mir seltsam bekannt vor. Aber so hatte ich's noch nie gehört. So hatte ich's noch nie gehört. Ihre Boote machten längsseits fest und mit dem Wind wehte Gelächter herüber. Sie nahmen ihre Blumenkränze ab und warfen sie zu uns herüber. Hey, und schon war die Party im Gange. Ich hab das Paradies gesehen. Es war um 1910. Der Steuermann hatte Matrosen am Mast und den Zahlenmeister haben die Gonokokken vernascht. Aber sonst waren wir bei bester Gesundheit. Es war um 1910. Der Steuermann hatte Matrosen am Mast und den Zahlenmeister haben die Gonokokken vernascht. Aber sonst waren wir bei bester Gesundheit.
Can you imagine if that was mandatory here in Trinidad and Tobago? Just imagine that. I mean, I can't do that. I probably can't do that, let alone some of our servicemen. Anyway, folks, that is where we wrap things up for this edition of AM Prime here on WESN. Thank you very much for joining me this morning. I'm Keaton Shaw, holding on for Mr. Andy Johnson. Tomorrow morning on AM Prime, Mr. Sean Michael Small will conclude this week's proceedings. But get in contact with us. Message us through our social media platforms at WESN, or you can email amprime@wesncc.com. Stay tuned for more content throughout the day. We have, of course, it's Thursday, we have Talking Point at 8 o'clock this morning. Following, we have Strictly Legal. Later on, we have Psyched. And then this afternoon, we have the Face of Sports with the fearless one, Andre Errol Batiste. But for now, folks, have a great day. Be safe out there. Don't forget, we're still living with COVID-19. So, if all is well, we'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.